Mabuhay, Kamustika, welcome. How are you? This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. Is it always a wonderful experience living in the Philippines? Some people think so. Some people think those people are not being realistic, and others can't take it and leave. I think that expectations have a lot to do with it. Subscribe to Love Beyond the Sea and help men find love overseas and learn how to live with their Filipino wife. That's really what this channel is about. And there are podcasts you can listen to at lvbts.com. Now, I got some of these, almost all of these negatives from internet blog on is in the Philippines vlogging community. And, they're all pretty common, so I thought I would list them, go through them one by one, and add a few of my own. The comments were made recently from someone who goes by the name of Charles. Now, they were talking about freedom, but I'm going to focus on these negative things that they listed because I've heard them so often. And they listed here pollution, garbage, brownouts, deficient internet, Filipino logic and reasoning or lack of it, frequent out of stock, the heat, the noise, the food, the scams, the traffic, the subpar healthcare system that they described it as, their bureaucracy. Now, I have an interest in what it would be like to live in the Philippines because we have a retirement home there. I was in the Philippines in 2015 to marry my wife. We returned in 2016. We went there in 2018 and again in late 2019. It's not a ton of experience, but it was it was over 4 different times of year. And I think I have seen enough of these negatives to know if I could handle it or not. The comment made in the blog I referenced made me want to address this. Now, in my videos and podcasts, I try not to be a sunshine pumper, so I should take a similar approach to certain living conditions in the Philippines as being married to a Filipina. Now, it was brought to my attention that the vast majority of men who go to the Philippines in search of gold of some kind don't last very long. They might seek a relationship because they've seen other men do this on the internet and for a lower cost of living and combine the two for a great life. What would make them give that up? But something does. It may have been their expectations were not realistic. Watching YouTube videos is nice and helpful, but it isn't the same thing as having your boots on the ground. When I married my wife in 2015, this was in May, very hot time of year, I was not at all considering living there someday. That idea started to form about 3 years into our marriage. I realized how happy my wife was there and how many friends and family members she had. I realized once my mother passed that I would have very little family around, so maybe it made sense to live in the Philippines in retirement. We built a house in the Philippines and actually stayed there the last trip we made. So I have a good idea of what that would be like. I would have to say that my interest and desire to live there full time has only continued to increase since we built the house. We would like to go again next year, 2021, over Christmas, and hopefully by then we've got these coronavirus issues worked out. Now, the author who made statements about some of the downsides to living in the Philippines seems like they have a good handle on it. I can certainly see where they are coming from. It's a pretty complete list. And while I could add something about, having the mentality to not look back on the things that you're familiar with that you will be leaving, I think the things they listed are worth talking about. So let's start with pollution. Now, I wish there was something I could do about this. I remember sitting in a sidecar, stopping in traffic and having all the exhaust fumes from the vehicles in front of us coming right at our faces. You can wear a mask, and it is possible when we retire in the Philippines that will do that. It's a lot easier if you're in your own car, for example, with the windows down. I haven't noticed any specific problems personally, the short term that I've been in the Philippines, as far as pollution goes, but that is different than living there for the rest of your life. Maybe the situation will be different in several years. Now they mentioned garbage. I don't know if they're referring to the burning of garbage here or something else, but the smell of burning garbage, that's something that you smell a lot, I guess. Maybe it's never really bothered me, whatever it was that I was smelling out there. Now, where we will live, I haven't noticed a bad garbage situation as far as, litter being all over the place. But I can't say I was really keeping my eyes open for that either. And they mentioned brownouts. Now, I've only experienced one brownout in the Philippines. That was in Surigao the last time we were there, and I have a video that I made that I captured right after it happened. And maybe in Davao it doesn't happen that often. As far as I know, it doesn't. But I know in other places that it can. Now they talked about the deficient internet. I've heard about that a lot. Now I don't think any of us had a problem with the internet speeds at our house, and we had Globe internet. I imagine the TV was hooked up to that as well as the computers and the laptops. When I was using my phone to do searches, there wasn't anything wrong with the speeds. I used it, the same way and the same speed that I do here in America. The only time I noticed slowness was when I was uploading a video to YouTube, and that could take several hours. They talked about, quote, Filipino logic and the reasoning or lack of it. I don't have much experience with this, but I certainly do from living in America, where everything seems to be getting more difficult all the time to do. I can't see there being much drop off here. I had 2 neck surgeries scheduled, and both of them botched about 8 years ago due to incompetence of office staff and an anesthesiologist who wasn't going to talk to me about my meds pre-surgery, even though that's what I was there for, to see him. That's routine. And after I reminded him, hey, I'm here to see you about these things, he read me the riot act and canceled it. It's about par for the course here. There may be something what the author said, but it can't be too far off from how hard it is to get things done here in America. Have you tried to call someone lately and get anything answered on the phone? I have little confidence in America with leaving a message for someone to listen to. I don't think they can comprehend it. I don't think they take notes or even play it back. I expect that to not go well. Philippines can't be any worse. Now they talk about being out of stock frequently, and that would be frustrating. So far, I'm not aware from my wife that acquiring something has been a challenge for her. I don't think, now if they're talking about ordering something to replace something, I don't know if they're talking about that or just anything to buy in general. But I've heard a lot of people talk about things being out of stock, and that would be a little bit of a frustration. They mentioned the heat, and that's fair. The good thing is it gets dark around 6 p.m. Then it's much more bearable. The first time I was there was during the summer, and that was around, their summer I think is around, March, April, May. And we got married in May, and that was some kind of heat. However, in later trips during July, August, December, January, the heat wasn't as intense, although I thought it was starting to warm up a little bit towards the 3rd week of January. I tend to like cold weather, and that is something I will have to give up moving to the Philippines full time. How about the noise? For sure, it will be noisier in the Philippines between barking dogs, roosters, and karaoke, and there isn't much you can do about all that. I personally don't mind the roosters. You can always wear earplugs if it gets particularly loud in your house or your neighbors across the street. What I don't like is if it's going to be noisy late at night. One night I had to try stuffing something into my ears as the family was up later than I preferred they were, but that is just something that needs to be dealt with on an individual basis. The food was listed. I don't know what they meant here about the food. I'm not too concerned about what to eat over there. You know, there's plenty of fish, chicken, eggs, fruits. I don't know if they really have vegetables there. I really didn't eat many of them. The grocery stores are just like they are here in America, only more massive. The lines are longer. We don't have to cancel that, unfortunately, for the time being. I remember when we were there in the Philippines, I counted at least 40, aisles, with the cash registers. 40. That's pretty big. So again, they're just massive over there. And you might want to try to avoid the outdoor markets just to be on the safe side. They mentioned scams. Having a Filipino around helps to avoid getting scammed. You have to watch the taxi drivers, though. They may have been referring to dating scams. I don't know. I'm very pleased with my wife from the Philippines. People do get scams or scammed, but they probably weren't the type who were serious about finding a wife, and maybe were mostly just interested in casual sex. They brought up the traffic. There is a lot of traffic pretty much everywhere, and if you aren't used to it, you probably won't like it very much. One of the first things I can picture in my mind when I met my wife in 2015 was traveling to see her sister, and it was an adventure just crossing the streets. Dangerous. We took a bus, jeepney, walked, and she had to hold my hand when we'd run across the street when we could find a little opening. The bus we took was so full, I was concerned I would be too slow to get out of my seat and exit the bus because we were wedged in there like sardines. Personally, I don't really mind being in those jeepneys, sitting in a side car or in the back of a scooter. It was all new to me, and I kind of liked it. My wife, however, is used to driving here in America, and she has her own car, and she wants to drive in the Philippines when we retire. I would rather not have our own car there just due to the expense, but on the other hand, she wants to drive and has driven there before and did an amazing job, so that gives us more freedom. We're talking Davao City here, which is a big place. I don't know how that compares with Cebu, which is a big city. Manila, of course, far worse for traffic. But when she drove us all over the place about a year ago, she did great, even at night. My wife is a skilled driver. It seems like she retains her sense of direction and memory the first time and drives well in the dark, too. Not something I can say. The Subpar healthcare system. This one is or maybe a more serious consideration. I'm not convinced the healthcare system is subpar, as that might depend on where you are and the services that you need and the hospital you are in. I assume Doctors Hospital in Davao is a good facility. It sure looks like it on their website. There are good hospitals in other countries, and many doctors were trained overseas. I know this: if something happens, I want the best place to go, especially for my wife and her family. Healthcare system encompasses more than just a good hospital here and there, and maybe there is some truth to that in some areas. Now, they mentioned the bureaucracy, and I'm not sure what they meant there, so I'm just going to skip that. Now, I will add the water pressure. I always talk about the water pressure as I try to out-talk my mother on the phone with my wife. I hate it when the toilets have low pressure. That's all I'm going to say about that. And what's up with the scarcity of toilet paper? I will add getting around. I mentioned this a little bit in the traffic. I know my wife wants to have a car, and I'm sure we will. But for the person who isn't married to a Filipina who can drive, he will be limited to the jeepneys, which have no windows, so the pollution and exhaust can affect you all on the road. And it gets sometimes very crowded in there. They'll have to use the scooters and the sidecars, maybe taxis, and that's something that could be taken advantage of. To me, the thing that makes all the difference is that you are in the Philippines with a wonderful Filipina wife. That has to make everything more bearable. I mentioned expectations at the beginning. Seeing the Philippines for yourself as opposed to YouTube videos is a big help. People have said that after a couple years or so that many Westerners can't deal with these issues and leave the Philippines. It may be that not really knowing anyone well there is a big factor too. If you're not going to get to know the the locals. I mean, I cannot wait to meet the locals, get to know my wife's family even better as the kids grow up. That's going to be a big plus for me. After my 4 times in the Philippines, I've likely seen everything that I need to see to have a good idea if the Philippines is going to be somewhere that I can live out the rest of my days, hopefully years. As long as my amazing Isa is there with me, I could probably live on Mars. I expect that I won't have the freedom I have enjoyed here for 59 years in America. I won't have the familiarity I'm used to. I'm not likely to get in the car and just drive around somewhere on my own. I know I won't be surrounded by people that follow, Husker football and basketball teams. I'll just have to use that, follow them on the internet. I expect that I will need to embrace the culture of the Philippines, and I want to do that. I expect that I won't be in my country like I always have been. And while that is strange and a bit uncomfortable, it's not anything insurmountable. I expect that I may not be eating all the same foods or have access to them. I hope they have good spaghetti. But I have more time to be able to ready myself for the day that we are in the Philippines for good. However, I also expect that it is up to me to go there in retirement with a good attitude and the right expectations, and to embrace the Philippines as my new home in the last chapter of my life, and I would like it to be an interesting one. My wife and I have talked about her dreams and the few things I'd like to be able to do there, which are for her to remember me by. I expect it will be an adjustment, but I already have had a head start with that. I think you have to do your due diligence and be prepared for the good and the bad. I may miss America, but who cares about that once I am in the Philippines? I will need to accept being far away from what has been home, with my love beyond the sea.